Her name was Mary Kovach, and she kept a tin box under the floorboard of a four-room company house in Cabin Creek, West Virginia. It was 1924. The box held three things: a folded dollar, a list of names written in pencil, and a brass token stamped with the name of the coal company that owned the house, the store, the school, and the church. Her husband, Janos, went down the shaft before the sun came up. Some mornings she watched him walk the rail line toward the tipple, lamp swinging from his cap, and she counted his steps until the dark swallowed him. 2 men on his shift had already died that year, one in a roof fall, one in the black damp. Mary did not let herself think about it for long. There was bread to stretch, and a paycheck that arrived in scrip, not money. Paper good only at the company store, where a sack of flour cost more than it did in town she could never reach. She had learned to do arithmetic that the company never taught. When a miner's pay came home, half of it was already gone before he touched it. Rent for the house they did not own, the price of his own lamp oil, the doctor fee deducted whether anyone got sick or not, the burial fund in case the shaft kept him. What was left, Mary stretched like a woman pulling a single thread across a wide loom, slowly, evenly, knowing it would snap if she pulled too hard. She was 29 years old. She had 4 children, a 5th coming, and a husband whose lungs had begun to rattle in the night. She had crossed an ocean from a village she could no longer picture clearly, married into a country she barely spoke, and landed in a hollow where the only road in was the railroad, and the only road out was money she did not have. So she made money where there was none. She made it the way a stonecutter makes a statue, by removing everything that did not need to be there. Here is what most people do not know. In the worst coal towns in America, the men dug the coal, but the women kept the families alive. A miner's wife who knew her tricks could feed 6 children on what a careless household wasted. She could turn 1 chicken into 4 meals. She could read the company store's books better than the clerk who kept them. And she could put away a hidden dollar a week in a town designed so that no one ever could. 3 numbers tell the story. A miner in 1924 might earn $5 for a 12-hour day and owe most of it back before he saw daylight. A good wife could cut a family's store bill by 40% without anyone going hungry. And in towns where the average family saved nothing, some of these women buried enough in mason jars to send a child to a real school far from the mine. This is the story of 30 things they knew. If you believe the people who came before us understood something we have forgotten, take a moment now and subscribe. What follows was never written in any book. It was passed mouth to ear, mother to daughter, in kitchens lit by a single lamp. We begin. 30. They never paid the company store its full price. They kept a shadow ledger. Every miner's wife kept 2 sets of books. The company kept one. She kept the other, in pencil, on the back of a feed sack or in a school tablet. When the monthly bill came, she checked it line by line against her own record. Clerks made mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes were honest. Sometimes they were not. A woman who could prove a dime was wrong got the dime back, and the clerk learned not to test her again. The lesson was simple. The people counting your money are not counting it for you. A debt no one checks always grows in the favor of the man who keeps the book. 29. They bought flour in the biggest sack and turned the empty sack into clothing. A 100-pound flour sack was cheaper per pound than 2 50-pound sacks. but the real value came after the flour was gone. The cotton sacking, washed and bleached, became dish towels, underclothes, and the lining of a child's coat. Manufacturers learned this and began printing the sacks in patterns so the cloth could become a dress. Nothing in that house had one life. Everything had two. 28. They rendered every scrap of fat and never bought soap. When a hog was killed in the fall, the fat that other families threw away was saved in a crock. Mixed with lye made from wood ash and rainwater, it became soap for the laundry, the dishes, the children, and the man who came home black to the elbows. A year's soap cost a family nothing but the labor and the smell of a Saturday spent stirring a kettle in the yard. Store soap was a luxury for people who did not know how to make their own. These women knew. 27. They planted a garden on ground the company said was worthless. The coal company gave each house a narrow yard, often steep, often shaded, often poor. The wives terraced it with stones, carried buckets of creek mud to enrich it, and grew beans, cabbage, and potatoes where the company expected only weeds. A summer garden could cut the grocery bill in half through the cold months that followed. The land was not generous. The women simply refused to accept its first answer. 26. They canned in summer for a winter no one could predict. A miner's income was never steady. A strike could stop it. An injury could end it. A mine could close without a day's warning. So the women canned everything that grew: beans, tomatoes, apples, the meat of a slaughtered hog, and lined the cellar shelves with jars that were really a kind of money. Food in the cellar was wealth no company could deduct. A full cellar in October was a family's only defense against a hungry March. 25. They organized a neighborhood swap so no cash ever changed hands. One family had too many eggs. Another had a cow and too much milk. A third could sew. The women built a web of trades that ran on trust, not currency. Eggs for milk, milk for mending, mending for a share of a slaughtered pig. In a town where real money was scarce and scrip was worthless outside, barter was the only economy that belonged entirely to them. The company controlled the money. It never controlled the trade between neighbors. 24. They bought nothing on credit they could not see disappearing. The company store offered credit easily because debt kept a family tied to the town. The wisest wives took only what they could repay in the same pay period and treated every charged item as a small chain. They paid down the book first before anything else, because a family that owed the company was a family that could never leave. Debt in a company town was not convenience. It was offense. 23. They reused the bathwater in a strict order, oldest to youngest. Hauling and heating water took hours and fuel. So one tub of water served the whole family on bath night. The father first, then the mother, then the children by age. The last child bathed in gray water, and no one thought it strange. The fuel saved over a winter was real, measured in coal that did not have to be bought back from the company that mined it. Comfort was rationed like everything else. What looked like hardship was arithmetic. 22. They turned coffee grounds and tea leaves twice before letting them go. A spoon of coffee made one strong pot and one weak one. The second pot was for the afternoon, when strength mattered less than warmth. Used grounds then went to the garden, where they fed the soil that fed the family. Tea leaves followed the same path. Nothing left that kitchen until it had given everything it had. 21. They learned which cuts of meat the butcher could not sell. The good cuts went to families with cash. The miner's wife asked for the rest: the neck bones, the feet, the organs, the tail. These cost almost nothing, and, in skilled hands, fed a family richly. A pot of beans flavored with a ham hock could stretch across 3 days. The expensive cut feeds you once. The cheap cut, cooked slow, feeds you all week. 20. They mended before anything tore, not after. A worn elbow was patched before it became a hole. A loose button was sewn before it was lost. The women inspected clothing every week, the way the mine inspected its timbers, looking for the small failure that became the large one. A shirt with one patch could be worn another season. A shirt with a torn-out elbow was good only for rags. They kept a basket by the lamp and mended in the evenings while the children slept, turning the dead hour after dark into the hour that saved a coat. The cheapest repair is the one made before the break. 19. They kept chickens not for eggs alone, but for the whole machine. A hen gave eggs, then meat, then feathers for a pillow, then bones for the pot. Her scratching turned the garden soil. Her waste fed it. When she stopped laying, she became Sunday dinner. The women understood the chicken as a small factory that ran on kitchen scraps and produced food, bedding, and fertilizer in return. A hen that only laid eggs was a hen half used. 18. They timed their store trips to the company's own schedule. Perishable goods at the company store dropped in price as they aged. The wives learned the rhythm. When the bread went stale, when the produce wilted, when the clerk wanted to clear a shelf. They shopped the markdowns and never paid full price for anything that could be bought a day later for less. Patience was a discount the impatient never received. 17. They made one good dress last a decade by guarding it. A woman owned perhaps one dress good enough for church. She protected it the way a man protects his tools. It was worn only on Sundays, brushed and aired after, stored away from moths, and altered as her body changed rather than replaced. A dress bought once could serve through a marriage. What you protect, you do not have to buy again. Stop for a moment and consider where these women lived. A coal company town was not a town in the way we mean the word. The company owned the houses and charged rent. It owned the store and set the prices. It paid the miners in scrip, paper or brass tokens good only at that store, so that wages flowed out of the company's left hand and back into its right. A historian once described the system plainly. A man could work a lifetime underground and end it owing money to the people who employed him. The numbers, where we can find them, are grim. In some camps, families spent the majority of their income at the company store, where prices ran well above what the same goods cost in independent towns. Rent was deducted before the miner saw his pay. So were charges for his tools, his lamp oil, the doctor, the burial fund. By the time the envelope reached the kitchen table, it was often nearly empty. This is why the women's knowledge mattered so much. In a fair economy, thrift is a virtue. In a rigged one, it is survival. Every dime a wife saved was a dime pulled back from a system built to keep her family poor. Agricultural economists who later studied these communities found that household management, the unpaid, unrecorded work of the wife, often determined whether a family slowly climbed out or sank. The men's labor was visible. It was dramatic. It killed them. But the quiet arithmetic happening above ground, in the kitchens and gardens and cellars, was what kept the children fed and,
in the rarest cases, what bought one of them a way out. Consider what a single misstep cost. A man injured in the shaft did not simply lose wages. The family lost its rent allowance, its store credit, its standing in a town that had no patience for the unproductive. A widow might be given 30 days to leave the only house she knew. There was no insurance worth the name, no pension, no safety net, but the one a woman wove herself out of jars and hidden dollars, and the goodwill of neighbors in the same trap. The state did not catch these families when they fell. The woman of the house was the net, and she knew it, and she built herself strong enough to hold the weight. The tricks that follow are the sharpest of all. 16. They bought in bulk with neighbors and split the savings. No single family could afford a barrel of anything, but 4 families could. The women pooled their scrip or cash, bought flour, sugar, and beans by the barrel at the lower bulk rate, and divided it on a kitchen floor. The savings, small per pound, added up across a year to real money. Alone, each was a small customer. Together, they bought like a store. 15. They kept a strict eat the cellar in order rule. Canned and stored food was eaten in the order it would spoil, oldest first, always. The women rotated the cellar shelves like a shopkeeper rotates stock, so that nothing was forgotten in a back corner until it turned. A jar wasted was a summer's work thrown away. Waste is not what you fail to buy. It is what you buy and let rot. 14. They made the children's shoes last through 3 feet. Shoes were bought large, stuffed at the toe, and worn until outgrown, then passed to the next child, then the next. Between feet, the women repaired the soles themselves with leather scraps and tacks. A single pair of shoes might walk 3 children through their early years. The shoe did not belong to a child. It belonged to the family. 13. They cooked once and ate the result 3 ways. A pot of beans was beans on the first day, then beans mashed into cakes and fried on the second, then beans stirred into a soup on the third. A roast became sandwiches, then hash, then stock. The women never cooked a single meal when one effort could yield 3 different ones. Cooking was not a daily chore. It was a weekly campaign. 12. They heated only the room they lived in. In winter, the family lived in the kitchen, where the stove burned anyway for cooking. The other rooms stayed cold and closed. Coal, the very thing the men dug, was too precious to waste warming an empty parlor. The family slept under heavy quilts in unheated rooms and gathered by the one warm stove by day. The children did their lessons at the kitchen table because it was the only lit, warm surface in the house, and the warmth of bodies in one room was itself a kind of fuel the company could not charge for. They mined the fuel of the nation and rationed their own by the lump. 11. They made their own remedies before they ever called the doctor. The company deducted a doctor's fee whether you used him or not, but a visit still cost more, and pride cost something too. The women kept a shelf of remedies, honey and onion for a cough, mustard plasters for the chest, herbs gathered from the hillside. They treated what they could and saved the doctor for what they could not. Knowing what not to pay for was its own kind of wealth.
10. They saved every button, nail, and scrap of string. A drawer in every kitchen held buttons cut from worn-out clothes, nails straightened with a hammer, string wound into a ball, and cloth scraps too small to name. These cost nothing to keep and saved a trip to the store every time something needed fixing. The woman who had a button never had to buy one. The frugal house is not the one that buys cheaply. It is the one that never has to buy at all. 9. They earned hidden cash the company could not deduct. A wife took in laundry, sold eggs and butter to families without hens, sewed for neighbors, or boarded a single miner for room and meals. This money came in real currency, not scrip, and it came directly to her, never through the company's books. It was the only income in the household that the company could not see and could not touch. The paycheck belonged to the company until it didn't. This money was always hers. 8. They taught the children to forage and made it a game. The hills around a coal camp held blackberries, walnuts, ramps, greens, and mushrooms for those who knew them. The women sent the children out with baskets and turned a free harvest into an afternoon's play. A summer of foraging filled jars and bellies at no cost but the walking. The mountain that surrounded them was a poor place to dig coal and a rich place to gather food. 7. They bought quality once when they could not afford to buy twice. It sounds backward for a poor household, but the wisest wives knew that a cheap pot that failed cost more than a good one that lasted. When they could, they bought the iron skillet, the sturdy boots, the good needle, the things that would serve for decades. They spent carefully, not cheaply. The poor cannot afford cheap things. Only the comfortable can. 6. They kept the Sabbath as a day of zero spending. One day a week, no money moved at all. The store was closed, the cooking was done the day before, and the family lived on what the house already held. It was rest, but it was also discipline, a weekly proof that the family could go a full day needing nothing from the company. A day that costs nothing teaches what little you truly need. 5. They hid money in places a husband's bad week could not reach. Drink was the ruin of more than one mining family, and a paycheck could vanish in a single hard night. So the women hid money in a mason jar buried by the fence post, sewn into a mattress, folded into a tin under the floor. It was not deceit. It was the family's last reserve, kept safe from any single bad decision, including one made at the kitchen table. The money you cannot easily reach is the money you still have when the others are gone. 4. They paid their debts in an order that kept them free. When money was short, the women paid first what would cost them their freedom if unpaid. The store credit that chained them to the town, the rent that kept the roof overhead. Smaller debts to neighbors were settled by trade or patience, because a neighbor would wait and a company would not. They understood that not all debts are equal, and that the order you pay them in decides who owns you. A debt to a friend is a promise. A debt to the company is a leash. 3. They invested in the one child most likely to get out. It was a hard truth, spoken quietly. A family that could not lift all its children sometimes chose to lift one, the brightest, the one with a teacher's notice, the one who might finish school and leave the mine behind forever. The hidden dollars in the jar were often saving toward exactly this. One child out was a foothold for the whole family. Sometimes the only way out of a hole is to push one person up to the edge first. 2. They treated knowledge as the one thing the company could not repossess. The company could take the house, the wages, the credit, and the years. It could not take what a woman knew: how to make soap, grow food, stretch a dollar, read a ledger. So the mothers taught the daughters everything, deliberately, knowing that this inheritance would survive every eviction and every closed mine. Skill was the only property they truly owned. They could lose everything they had. They could not lose what they knew. 1. They believed, against all evidence, that thrift was a form of hope. This was the deepest trick of all, and it was not a trick at all. In a town designed to keep them poor, these women saved not because saving promised wealth, it rarely did, but because the act of saving was a refusal. Every hidden dollar said the future was not yet decided. Every full cellar said the family would survive the winter. Thrift was not despair. It was the most stubborn kind of hope a poor woman could practice. They were not saving money. They were saving the belief that tomorrow could be different. Mary Kovach buried her tin box deeper as the years went on. The dollar inside became 2, then 5, then a folded stack she never spoke of. Her husband never knew the full of it. The company never suspected it. And in 1931, when the mine cut its shifts and 100 families went hungry in Cabin Creek, the Kovach children ate from a cellar Mary had filled and money Mary had hidden. Dollar by stubborn dollar, against exactly such a year. One of her sons finished school. He left the mountains and never went back down a shaft. He carried out with him no money to speak of, but he carried the arithmetic his mother taught him, how to make a little do the work of a lot, how to read the books the powerful keep, how to save in a world built so you can't. He became, of all things, an accountant, and he told his own children that everything he knew about money he had learned from a woman who never had any. We tend to remember coal country for the men, for the strikes and the cave-ins and the dark heroism of the shaft. But the people who actually decided whether a family climbed out or went under were rarely underground at all. They were in the kitchens, doing arithmetic no economist recorded, turning a dangerous paycheck into another month of survival. History wrote down the tonnage of coal and the names of the companies and the dates of the disasters. It did not write down the woman who fed 6 children on what the company meant to leave her with nothing. But the children remembered. The children always remembered. These 30 tricks were never about being cheap. They were about refusing to be beaten by a system that held every card. A miner's wife could not change the price of flour or the danger of the shaft, but she could control her own house with a precision that bordered on art. And in doing so, she bought her family the one thing the company sold to no one: a chance. That is the thing worth remembering. Not the poverty. The skill inside it. If a woman you knew once kept a garden, hoarded buttons, or hid a few dollars where no one could find them, tell me about her in the comments. These names deserve to be spoken. The arithmetic deserves to be remembered. We will leave the lamp on.